The town held its breath at dusk, though no one noticed it but the wind. Lantern light burned low and red outside the saloon, swaying gently, as if reluctant to cast its glow upon what went on inside. The boardwalks creaked beneath boots worn by men who carried hunger in their eyes and dust on their tongues. Their laughter was coarse, thick with whiskey and smoke, and the cards on the tables whispered louder truths than their words ever dared. It was a place where men measured worth in coins and women in silence. She stepped through that crooked doorway like a shadow reluctant to belong anywhere. Her dress was faded, her boots cracked from miles of road. Her hair, though once golden in the sun, now carried the dust of forgotten fields. There was no perfume on her skin, no softness left for men to lay claim to. Only eyes that held storms, dark, restless, unbroken. Eyes that had seen too much of men and not enough of kindness. They whispered about her, those who leaned against the bar, those who played with dice and spit tobacco. They called her ruined, though it was not she who had ruined anything. They named her desperate, though it was not she who had chosen desperation. Their words clung to her like burrs on cloth, small stings that she bore with silence. She walked through it all as if through rain, sodden cold, but still standing. In the far corner, a man lounged with his hat tipped low. His laughter rang louder than the others, his swagger fed by the weight of silver in his pocket. He was not cruel by accident. He was cruel by design. His boots tapped against the wood in a rhythm of ownership, his gaze sweeping over her as one might appraise a horse. He called her over with a snap of fingers. She did not flinch, though her hands curled slightly at her sides. The barkeep slid out of the way, knowing the pattern, knowing the sound of coins before they hit the table. The man threw silver down with a careless flick of wrist. The clatter rang out, cutting through the haze of laughter and cards. He grinned, showing teeth, and said words too simple to carry the weight of what they meant. She looked at the coins, then at him. For a long breath, she did not move. Then she let the words slip from her lips, low, steady, like a knife drawn slow from its sheath. You paid for me, now finish it. The room seemed to still at that. Some men chuckled nervously, others drank to cover the silence. The words carried not invitation, but indictment. A challenge, a surrender, and something deeper still, a mirror held to every man who ever thought silver could buy a soul. He pulled her close, expecting heat, expecting compliance. But the closer she came, the more he saw. Beneath the lamplight, her scars revealed themselves, not only the faint lines across her skin, but the sharper truths etched in her gaze. This was not a woman broken, but a woman who had walked through fire and come out bearing its smoke in her lungs. He wanted beauty without memory, flesh without weight. But what he found in her eyes shattered him, though he would never admit it aloud. He saw the storm. He saw the defiance that had not been crushed. He saw the unspoken truth, that all his silver meant nothing here. His hand faltered. His grip loosened. He muttered something half-formed, and with a shove, he pushed her back as though she had burned him. The coins lay scattered across the table, untouched. He spat to the floor, though the bitterness was his alone, and stalked out into the night. The saloon murmured in his wake, but no one met her eyes. She stood there, silent, the silver gleaming at her feet like the cheap offering it was. She did not stoop to gather it. She left it lying there, like shed scales of a snake. Outside, the night air met her with cold honesty. The stars stretched wide, unjudging, their silence kinder than any word spoken inside. Her boots crunched against the dirt road as she walked, her figure swallowed by shadow. Behind her, laughter rose again in the saloon, but it no longer touched her. She carried the weight of shame that was not hers to carry, the rage that came from years of being seen and unseen in the same breath. Each step down that lonesome road was heavy with memory, yet steady with endurance. The horizon waited with a darkness not yet named. Somewhere beyond, past fences and fields, past whispers and coins, someone waited without knowing. A different path would cross hers, though not tonight. Tonight, she was alone with the stars, who at least did not demand, did not mock, did not buy, did not abandon. The lantern's glow faded behind her. The dirt road stretched before her, and though sorrow clung like dust, somewhere faint within her steps there flickered the smallest thing, something like hope, though she dared not name it yet. The sun rose slowly over the fields, painting the horizon in soft gold. Grass bent under the weight of morning dew, and the air held a fragile stillness, as if the day had not yet decided what it would become. A man stood by a broken fence, mending it with patient hands. His hat brim shaded his eyes, his movements steady, deliberate, without hurry. There was nothing boastful about him, nothing that sought attention. He was a man who had made peace with silence, who carried his strength without the need to show it. From the road came the sound of weary steps. She moved like someone without a place, each footfall a surrender, her shoulders heavy with nights spent under open skies. The dirt clung to her dress, her face pale beneath the dawn. She had walked farther than she cared to count, and her body bore it, trembling faintly as she leaned against the fence post to steady herself. He noticed her, though not with a quick curiosity of men in town. His eyes lifted, and for a moment he simply watched, the way one watches a cloud drift across the morning sky. Then he set aside his hammer and reached for the canteen hanging on the fence. Without a word, he stepped closer, holding it out. She looked at him as though waiting for the price. But no words came, no demand, no measuring of her worth. Only the tin canteen, full to the brim, the water inside catching the light of the rising sun. Her hand trembled as she took it, and she drank carefully, not in desperate gulps, but as though honoring the gift. When she lowered it, she found his gaze steady, not sharp, not heavy. There was no judgment there, no expectation, just a simple offering of what one human gives another in need. She nodded once, a gesture small but sincere. He answered it with the faintest dip of his head, then returned to his work. The fence creaked softly as he hammered the nail into place. She lingered, uncertain, her body begging for rest, though her spirit whispered against it. At last, she lowered herself onto the grass by the fence, not asking permission, but not unwelcome. He did not chase her off. He let her sit there in the warmth of the rising sun, mending his fence in silence, while she closed her eyes for the first time in days, without fear someone might take something more from her. The memory of the first man drifted through her like a shadow. His voice, his coins, the way he had looked at her, as though she were nothing but weight to be carried for a night. She remembered the heat of shame, the sting of rejection that had not been hers to bear. But this man, this quiet one, offered nothing but stillness. He did not strip her with his eyes. He did not count her value in silver. In his silence she was not invisible, but neither was she put on display. She was simply there. It unsettled her almost more than cruelty did. Cruelty she understood. Cruelty she had weathered. But this gentleness, this lack of demand, what was it? She did not trust it yet, but she did not move away. In the days that followed, their paths crossed again. A loose strap on her worn boots broke as she walked near his land, and he fixed it with steady hands, saying nothing more than was needed. She began to notice the way he worked, how he never rushed, how he treated even a stubborn horse with patience rather than anger. When she offered to help, he did not laugh, did not tell her she was too weak or too soft. He handed her tools, as though it were the most natural thing in the world. He showed her how to mend tack, how to thread the leather, how to pull it tight without tearing it. His hands guided not by grasping hers, but by demonstration. He did not reach for her. He let her learn, let her make mistakes without scolding. When the leather finally held firm, she felt a flicker of something she had not felt in years: usefulness. Her worth measured not in coins, not in beauty, but in skill, in effort. He walked beside her, sometimes when she made her way into town, his stride slow enough to match hers. He did not fill the air with words, nor did he leave it heavy with silence. He let her speak when she wished, and when she did not, he let the wind do the talking. Bit by bit, the dust of old shame began to lift from her shoulders, as though the sun itself burned it away. Not everyone saw her the same. Neighbors watched from porches with narrowed eyes. Some whispered cruelly when she passed, their voices sharp with judgment. They said she had no place here, no claim to respect. But others were softer. A widowed storekeeper, gray-haired and slow-moving, spoke kindly to her as she bought thread, reminding her that not all men took to owning, that some knew how to share. Once, a child in town greeted her with a smile, sticky from candy, unburdened by gossip. The child's small hand tugged at her skirt, eyes bright with curiosity, asking no questions but offering a laugh. For a moment she felt seen not as ruined, not as desperate, but as human. These moments stacked themselves like planks of a home, fragile at first, then sturdier. The quiet man never claimed credit for it, never asked her to repay anything. He simply let her stand beside him, let her breathe in a world where she was not bartered or shamed. Slowly, she began to believe that perhaps she could exist without carrying the weight of every whispered word. And though the past still lingered like smoke on her skin, there were mornings when she would catch herself looking at the horizon with something unfamiliar in her chest. Something that felt almost like hope. The sky stretched wide and soft, the kind of blue that seemed endless, as if it had been brushed by a gentle hand. The field below was alive with wildflowers, their colors bold against the whisper of grass. She moved among them slowly, her fingertips brushing petals as if afraid they might vanish at her touch. For the first time in longer than she could remember, her lips curved into a smile she did not notice. It came not from effort, but from a place inside her, unguarded. He watched from a distance, leaning against a fence post, his hat low over his brow. The sight of her smiling did something to him, something he did not put into words. He did not step forward to claim the moment. He let it belong to her, though his own quiet smile echoed hers, carrying its weight without sound. Later, they sat by the edge of a small stream. The air was warm, the water moving lazy and sure. She drew her knees up, wrapping her arms around them, and for a long while she said nothing. Then her voice rose low, steady but fragile, as if carried from some far-off memory. She spoke of being traded like something less than flesh, the way silver had once clattered on a table and decided her fate. Her voice cracked when she repeated the words she had whispered that night. "You paid for me, now finish it." They hung heavy in the air, stripped of any defense. He did not look away. His silence was not emptiness, but strength. He carried her words the way a man carries something precious, careful not to drop or dismiss them. His gaze did not flinch, did not turn sharp with pity. He simply let her truth rest between them, unshaken, unjudged. And for that, she breathed easier, though tears traced her cheeks like quiet rivers. That night, in the glow of a single lamp, he brought her something wrapped in cloth. She opened it to find a worn book, its cover faded, but intact. She looked up at him, puzzled, and he admitted with a sheepish smile that he could barely read more than a few words himself. Still, he had thought she might want it. She traced the letters on the page with her fingertip, her lips forming them softly. Then, with patience, she began to read aloud, her voice slow, steady, faltering at times, but alive. He listened, leaning close enough to hear, his brow furrowed in concentration. She caught him stumbling over a word and laughed, a sound so rare it startled them both. He laughed too, rough and clumsy, but genuine. They tried again, side by side under the lamp's glow, their shadows stretched long across the wall. The words themselves hardly mattered. What mattered was the closeness born of imperfection shared, of laughter blooming where once there had only been silence. Days later, while working near the barn, she cut her hand on a jagged edge of wood. The blood came fast, a sharp red against her skin. She hissed at the sting, clutching her palm. He was at her side in a moment, steady hands taking hers without hesitation. He fetched clean cloth, binding the wound with care. His touch was firm but gentle, his focus entirely on her safety. She watched his hands, the way they worked not to take, not to demand, but to heal. The thought slipped from her lips before she could stop it, her voice a tremble. "No one has ever touched me without taking." He paused, his fingers tightening briefly around the cloth. His eyes lifted to hers, steady, warm, carrying no hunger, but something deeper. "You are not a burden," he said softly, though not in words. His gaze alone spoke it. "You are a gift." She lowered her eyes, not from shame, but from the weight of believing it for the first time. That night, she lay awake in the small room she had claimed, the sound of crickets in the distance. Her hand throbbed faintly, bound by his cloth, but the ache in her chest was different. It was not sorrow this time. It was something growing where sorrow once lived. But the world beyond their quiet had not forgotten. In town, the whispers had shifted. Men muttered over whiskey, their voices sharp with bitterness. The first man still carried her name on his tongue, but not with longing, with venom. His pride had been wounded, his reputation mocked in the shadows. Men like him did not let go quietly. He spoke of her as if she were still a debt unpaid, as if she had stolen something by daring to live beyond the coins he had thrown. The words traveled, carried on careless tongues. Some dismissed them, some fed them. But all the while, the shadows gathered, stretching longer across the land, hinting at storms yet to come. And though she did not know the shape of it yet, she felt the change in the air. The fragile bloom of trust that had only just begun would soon be tested in the fire of another reckoning. The morning broke red across the horizon, the kind of red that carried warning. Dust stirred along the ground, curling upward in small spirals as the quiet man saddled his horse. His movements were steady, but his eyes lifted often toward the east, where the land stretched wide and empty. The silence of dawn was not still, it was waiting. In the distance, a faint line of riders appeared, their figures rising from the haze as if drawn from the earth itself. The past had come riding, and with it the venom of pride that refused to die. The quiet man rested his hand on the saddle horn, not in fear, but in knowing. Some reckonings could not be delayed forever. She stood at the edge of the yard, her dress stirring in the morning wind. Her hands trembled, though her shoulders held firm. She had known this day might come, had felt it in whispers carried on the air each time she walked through town. Now, as the riders drew closer, she knew the truth. She would not face it as the woman who once whispered in resignation, "You paid for me, now finish it." She would face it as the woman who had found her voice. The first man rode at the front, his hat low, his smile twisted with cruelty. His pride had not softened, it had hardened into something sharper. He dismounted with a flourish, boots striking the earth with a rhythm of ownership. His men followed, their laughter coarse, their eyes hungry. He called out to her, his voice dripping with venom. He mocked her name, mocked the dust on her dress, mocked the quiet man at her side. He spat into the dirt, words sharp as barbed wire. She was his, he said, bought fair and square, paid for in silver that still lay unanswered. He reached for her with his voice as though reaching with a rope, dragging her back into chains of memory. She stepped forward before the quiet man could move. Her heart pounded, but her voice rose clear. She told him no silver had ever bought her, no coin had ever measured her worth. She told him that night had been his shame, not hers, and that he would never again lay claim to her spirit. Her words carried across the dust like the crack of a whip, silencing the laughter of his men. The quiet man stood at her side, not ahead of her, not shielding her as though she were fragile, but shoulder to shoulder. His presence was a wall, his silence a vow. He did not fight for her as though she were something to be won. He stood with her as though she were something already whole. The first man's face twisted. Rage rose in him, pride wounded deeper than any blade could cut. He drew his pistol, the metal catching the red sun. The quiet man's hand went to his own, slow but sure. The air thickened. Dust swirled around their boots. Every heartbeat stretched into eternity. The world seemed to hold its breath. Then a shot cracked, sharp and final. Smoke coiled upward, drifting in the dawn light. Horses shifted, uneasy. The first man staggered, his gun falling from his hand. Whether it was his body that failed or his spirit that broke, none could say, but the fight drained out of him all the same. His men looked on uncertain, unwilling to follow a man stripped of the power he had once carried. He fell not in glory, but in defeat, crumbling beneath the weight of his own pride. His laughter was gone, his voice emptied of venom. What had mattered was never the clash of guns, never the dust of battle. It was the moment when cruelty lost its hold, when dignity stood unbroken. The quiet man lowered his pistol. She did not look at the fallen with pity nor with triumph. She simply turned away, her hand brushing against the quiet man's as they walked back toward the house. It was not the touch of possession, nor even of comfort. It was the touch of two lives bound by choice, not by chain. The sun climbed higher, burning away the last of the red. The dust settled. The riders who had come with cruelty turned back, silent, their faces grim. In the yard, only the sound of wind remained, soft against the fence posts. And so it was that the reckoning came and went, leaving not ruin, but a truth that lingered. Love is not bought, the old voice whispered, as if from somewhere deeper than memory. It is built, board by board, glance by glance, until it stands like a home against the storms. Scars are not shameful. They are proof of survival, etched upon the skin like maps of all the places we have endured. Out on the frontier, strength was never the loudest gun or the harshest word. The bravest thing was not to fight, but to see. To see another soul not as broken, not as owned, but as worthy, and to be seen in return. So when the dust settled and the sun rose, the story did not end in violence, but in something quieter. A man who stood steady, a woman who found her voice, and the truth that in a world of cruelty, the gentlest act was the fiercest kind of courage.